I don't hear the clapping. Where's the clapping? There they go. We got some ding dongs. That's good. Yay! There we go. That's better.
Yay!
Yay! That's right. Yeah, there you go. Okay, so I really appreciate the chance to do this. This is one of those things where this is a work of passion, of love. This is something I've been working on for about 5 years now. And Alex's invitation to do this timed really nicely with me getting to the point where I'm starting to understand what I've been trying to say for the last 5 years. So this is the first time I've ever tried to pull this whole thing together and explain it to a group of people, many of whom haven't heard about it before. So I'm really, I'm really excited to bring this to a new group, to some people who I haven't met before. I also recognize some names in there of people who I do recognize. There's going to be some catcalling in the background. If anybody sees me getting taunted, that's a perfectly natural response. It's kind of what I expect. So the first page that we've got here, and I've asked people to scribble on this for a reason. One of the things that I really like to be able to do with this is that rather than a presentation, think of it more as a dinner theater. The more you guys engage in this process and beat up my slides and become part of the way this gets presented, the more interesting it is for me. I already made the slides, so I don't need them to remain the way that they are. And I hope that you guys will be engaged those 4 or 5 times during the course of this discussion, where I'm hoping that you guys will actually build the slide for me, and then we'll do some presentation for that. But first, just before we start, I thought I'd give you a quick introduction of who I am, and then we'll go on to talk about what this whole rhizomatic learning stuff is all about. So I work at the University of Prince Edward Island. I have a title there that nobody understands, and that's kind of by design. I'm the manager of web communications and innovations. I'm also, go Panthers, nice one. I'm also the chair of the e-learning committee, and I'm involved in a lot of different kind of projects. And as Alec describes, I have some technical capacity, but I'm interested in the structure of education. And more than anything, I'm interested in the why of education. So over the different things that I do, the top there you see, I have, where's the fancy pointer? I've been sort of co-managing a community of educators called EdTech Talk for about 6 years now. We've done, as a group, maybe 1,500 live webcasts, and it's a community of people who come together to learn together, but without a real structure, without sort of a plan per se, really just people who really care about something coming together to learn. And that was the point where I went, hey, there's something going on here. There's something about this sort of less structured, less formal learning. I mean, we've all sort of come across informal learning in our own ways, but that practical experience was mine. There's a bunch of people, I met with them every week. We sat down to talk about stuff, and then I started to learn. I'd end up in a meeting, and I would know the answer to things, and I would have insights based on the things I had heard and the things we tried that I just had nothing like that, a year or 2 years before. So from there, I've done a few other things. The course on the bottom of the page here, this is sort of my baby. I teach it every couple years because, again, I have other responsibilities inside the university. I don't get to teach as much as I'd like. But this is sort of my baby, and you can look this up and see how I've tried to structure that approach, that open approach online. And I've also been involved in the MOOCs that have been taught over the last 3 or 4 years. I'm one of the co-facilitators for the Change 11 MOOC right now. And that has 2,000 participants and, 2,000 people signed up. There are much fewer people than that participating. And it is another attempt at trying to, how do we use the internet? How do we use the availability of all this stuff and the access that we have to people and the connectivity to make learning as good as it can possibly be? And in this idea of rhizomatic learning comes out of all those experiences and the sort of different things that I've done and different things I've tried to do, and then trying to talk to other people about it, trying to replicate some of the successes, trying to avoid some of the mistakes and some of the sort of problems that we've had. But really, the whole conversation, the whole part of this that I think is important, I'd like you guys to help me with this here on the next slide. The big question that I think we all need to ask, and you see it right now in the news. I don't know if you guys have seen the recent article that came out from the Gates Foundation where they said, we really need to be able to get management styles into the classroom so we can train teachers and we can evaluate them properly. And in none of that conversation from Bill Gates, and in none of the stuff that I'm hearing about educational change in the States, and nothing that I hear in a lot of other sort of places, is the answer to why do we actually educate students. So I'd like you to take over the screen here, take the text, and give me your answer. So somebody's saying to prepare for life so they can think for themselves. Tomorrow's leaders, I'm guessing, is that text is going to come out to. Giving them a guide to the world. I think one of the things you're definitely going to see as one of the approaches and one of the concepts that people have is this idea of normativity. So we're trying to create, so we can retire. Nice one. You're trying to construct a group of citizens to come after you, and you want them to construct them in a certain way, right? So that they can be the kind of people that you want them to be. There's a trick to that. There's a problem there. And that's that, how are we ever going to agree? I mean, we can't agree to get together on any social issue. We're divided. We got political parties that divide us on polar opposites. We have people who are social conservatives and social liberals. And in order to come together to an agreement, if we take that normative, we take that school is about making them a specific kind of person, then we end up in that trouble of trying to agree. We have some others that are saying, think for themselves, to get jobs. And let's take the get jobs one. One of the problems, I think, is a nice little theme that's coming up here in a lot of places. I really appreciate the fact that you guys are getting in here. Is when you look at this, we've got good citizens, caring, responsible, self-reporting. I like that word a lot, so they can pay taxes like I do. So we've got that theme of normativity, that theme of trying to make them a certain way. We have this idea that we're part of a system, right, where we prepare them at one level, they go to, say, college, or they go to university, they go out and get jobs. We have this other idea that happens as well. And we want them to have whatever skills that they're going to need to be successful. And those are things that we all agree on, that they need to have the skills that they're going to need to be successful. The problem is, and where this all comes down to, is how are we going to decide what those are? And does our school system do that now? And what kinds of things can we do to come together as a group of educators, or as a group of teachers or whatever, to come to terms with what we want the real outcomes of the school system to be? Because if we say stuff like good citizens or to get a job and stuff, that means that we know what those are. And I certainly don't know what skills or literacies it's going to take in 20 years for somebody to be able to get a job, So those are things that I'm concerned about. So what I'm going to do over the course of this is present three different outcomes for the education system. And then I'm going to argue for mine, and then I'm going to let you guys fight with me about it. How does that sound? That's what I'm hoping for. Great. Good. Okay. Perfect. No, we have never known the future. That's perfect. That's what I like. Okay, good. All right. So I've got three sort of metaphors for this. We have workers, soldiers, and nomads. The first two I've made up and try to put in to this argument. The nomads comes directly from a French philosopher. His name are two French philosophers. Their names are Gilles Deleuze and Guattari. And they are, if you've ever gone into that philosophy, that's where it comes from. If not, we're not going to delve too deeply into it right now. But anyway, workers, soldiers, and nomads. So I would argue that the primary group that we end up structuring out of our education system are workers. Our original system was set up this way. We built a system back 150 years ago so that people showed up on time, so they did disconnected tasks, so that they would take on the things we asked them to do and do them in a structured way. There's a quote that I've never been able to cite that I heard at a conference once that said, we're training our students still to be the best members of the Industrial Revolution. And really, that's not the place that we need to be anymore. It's not only about the assembly line education. It's about us knowing what they need to know. So you need to know this and you need to know that. And then what we do is we set them up to be obedient and to be passive. And we measure them based on whether or not they're going to do those things. Right? And our education systems tend to go that way. Because if bureaucratically, almost, if you talk to, I was spent a lot of time the last couple of weeks with the Minister of Education here on PEI, and they're kind of stuck. They need to be able to talk about broadly what's happening in the education system. Well, unless you define those things really specifically, it can be really hard to know what's going on. So then we tend to package it up as much as we can so we can make those things. And again, by worker here, I mean somebody who lives within the system. I don't mean a worker in the sense that they don't think or whatever. I mean that somebody who is, by nature, understanding the system and obeying the system. So let's take the next step up. Let's talk about the soldier. So we've got, why do those workers need education? They need training. There's a really interesting distinction, and Lisa brings this up, and it's one that people do come up with, and that's, should we be doing anything other than training? Is that what we should be doing for a section of society? And I think that's a valid question. The next level up are the soldiers, and I mean, to some degree, that's kind of where we end up. When you go up and you get qualified as being a bachelor's degree, and you're qualified with a master's, and you get qualified with a PhD, you get qualified as a master welder, you get qualified as somebody who is known as someone who knows how it's supposed to be done. You become an expert inside the system. Those people, for the most part, are there to replicate the system they already have. If you look at the way, and again, I encourage you to look at that Bill Gates article. I have a blog post that describes this on my blog right now, and it has the links to those articles in it if you guys are interested. But he is talking about making sure that those students know how to read and write and do math and those kinds of things. None of those things are the skills that led him to success, Bill Gates. He's not someone who obeyed the status quo and followed the rules and did those things. He took a completely different path. But now, when he's in that position, he's trying to hold the status quo in. Right? So, yeah, Gates' wife is still talking about teaching to the test. Okay, so the third position that I'm arguing for is the nomad. It's a creative thinker. It's somebody who is not trying to make, to follow the path that we set out in front of them. It's somebody who is actually able to do divergent thinking. Somebody who is actually going to be able to, create and change the world that they're in and criticize it. Now, it doesn't need to be somebody who's a revolutionary. I know there's a lobster fisherman in my hometown who is the sort of person who looks at his work every day and goes, is there a way I can do this differently that's going to make this work better? And it's that kind of divergent thinking. It's that kind of change, right? Change management that is going to allow us to be successful, right? As the world changes more and more, as things speed up and as those things change, these are the people who it does look like a talking horse. I agree, Mick. You know what? I thought that same thing when I put that picture in there. It does look like somebody circled the talking horse. Very good. Very good. So, if you buy those three sections, if you buy us sort of building a society, we look at that initial structure of a school system that was entirely designed to build a workforce. Where we say, these are the things that you need to know. Now know them. Okay, we've checked that you know them. Okay, we have a second group that's in charge of figuring out what people need to know. And then this third group of people who are already in our society, but the school, they do it really to spite the education system. If you look at the research, there's a piece of research that, again, I will post, and I didn't get that link set up, and I should have. There's a piece of research that came out 2 years ago about early childhood education, where they're seeing more and more that this kind of nomadic thinking is implicit in those kids before they actually hit the school system. And that slowly you can see it start to go out. And very much like the video, the RSA video, that tracks the creativity in students, and as it goes down, the longer that the students end up in the system. But that's because when we talk about students who come into our university, for instance, they want to have an expectation, they want to know what the outcome is, and they want to know how to hit that outcome. It's very common practice inside of many, many educational institutions, actually almost all of them, to hear, tell me what the outcomes are. The student needs to know what success looks like in order to meet success. My argument here is that particular approach, that exact approach, saying, what's the outcome? What does success look like? How do I meet success? creates people or encourages people to not be creative, right? That's the argument. So, back to the board. Okay, one last comment. Actually, this quote was put in at the very last minute because it showed up on my blog post about this that I wrote for your class from somebody who came in. I hate doing this to people, but I'm going to read it to you anyway. So nomads are not wanderers, homeless, nor necessarily restless or relentless. They are purposed, mindful, drawn to next discoveries, into bringing these home. They're communal and communicative in both social settings and self-reflection. Learners because of and teachers with their families, where the context is about making it safe to take risks, and where the mentoring is about making it possible to discern risk and make other decisions. This came from somebody, I have no idea who this person is. They dropped into the blog post and put this in, and I think it's one of the nicest descriptions that I've seen. Also, a nice argument for why. Is she part of this course? I love this quote. It's fantastic. And it really does.
One of our non-credited participants. Yeah.
Yeah, there she is. I thought this was a fantastic comment. It really did. I had no idea. But yeah, that was really nice. And actually, there was another comment, which we'll address later, from a negative comment, which was really, really on target as well. So the question then is, should we be encouraging nomads? We've all been in those classrooms with the kids who don't fit. Is this something that we should be doing? So this is another one of those righty slides. So I ask you all to come back into the middle here. So should we be encouraging this? Is this something that you guys buy? Is this an argument that works out for you? Because, you could look at this, but quietly. Yeah, I can't have 240 nomads. What do I do with that many? So what do you do inside of a situation where you have, and to some degree, this is what we end up with in those MOOCs that I talked about earlier. So we have, 2,000 people who registered. We have, let's say, a couple of hundred people who actively participate. They're nomads. I have no idea what they're doing at any given time. They fight with us all the time. They disagree with us. They take things in different directions. And, they frighten me, and that's a really good point, because how are you going to be able to, you take right before this class started, one of the participants had said that they have a parent who is somebody who is just, they're very opinionated about their students' education. We've all been around those parents, and you know what? It's their kids, and I appreciate the fact that they care, but there are a lot of people who really like to think, I'm one of those parents, who really like to think that they should tell people what to do about their students' learning. And you know what? We encourage that. But if we're in a situation where you have to look at that parent and go, oh, I just want the kids to be nomads, that's going to be a lot tougher to organize than saying your kid got a 76 on the test. There's a lot of protection. There's a lot of safety inside the other way. And teachers, educators are not defended by the system. As far as I'm concerned, they're mostly attacked by the system. So we've got people saying yes. We've got people saying this is one option. And I think that's a really nice point too. I don't suggest that, I, for instance, don't teach academic writing in this way. I don't want my academic writing students to leave my class as nomadic thinkers about academic writing, because the course is about inculcating people with the established standards. It's saying, this is the way it's always been done, and this class is designed to teach you how it's always been done. So it's not about nomadic thinking. There are definitely situations where it's more appropriate or less appropriate. Okay. We prepare them for the hardships of being a nomad. I think that's a really nice point too. I think that's a really great point, because it's not the easiest path. It's in any employment situation, any educational situation, you will see people who'll say, look, just tell me what you want done. Tell me how I know when it's going to be finished, and then we'll be fine, right? And I think we've gone further down that road now, maybe than we've ever been. So I think that even if we don't, and it's not necessary to be nomadic about everything, right? And it's not necessary to have everyone take that road, but where can we create space for it, maybe, is a way of looking at it. Okay, so only if our system is able to support nomadic learning. If they don't fit in the system, change the system. Nomads are the students. There can be no degrees of nomadness. There, we just made Just made up a new word. That's awesome. Okay, so I do think that there are reasons why this shift is in place. And I think that to some degree, those people have always been part of our culture, but we haven't had much of a chance to support them before. And there's some reasons for that. We've been stuck in a situation where we really had to focus on memory. We really had to focus in memory, both in terms of what's in my head or what's been, crimped into a book and packaged and put on a shelf somewhere, because there was no other real way for us to take information and pass it from place to place to place to place. So we've thought about knowledge as being memory. It's something that we remember, we know that it happened before, and then we look at the past. And feel free, I saw somebody flick on the screen here on the feel free to muck up this slide too. We look back to the past and we say, okay, that's a thing that happened, we know that's there, let's replicate that, right? And that's the knowledge that's been passed forth. They're the things that we can replicate. So we can repeat something that's been done before, right? Oh, the librarian, I'm about to badger books here in a second, sorry. So much of performance has been about repetition. But again, I'm suggesting that those things are environmental, right? We were, as a culture, in a place where we needed to be able to, if you're going to pass how to, refine silver, which is actually something I know how to do, if you're going to pass that on to somebody and you need to explain to them that, silver melts at 1800 degrees and you have to tilt it in this way and, melt it for this long, you need somebody to be able to repeat that back, because it's the only way you're going to be able to keep it. The real moments of learning, though, those points where we actually grasp a concept, where the concept stops being a step-by-step thing and it becomes something that becomes part of us, I would argue. And the example I always use for people is parallel parking. There's a point at which, if you ever do it, and then I hope if this gets in your mind and this happens to you tomorrow, that you go to parallel park and all of a sudden you haven't done it in a little while maybe, and you go, oh wait, how do I do this again? And as soon as that happens, as soon as you ask the question, how do I do this again? How do I do this? Then you start to try to do it step by step, and you're going to end up on the curb and you're going to drive out and you're going to come back in. The best description of that I ever heard was from Wynton Marsalis, the trumpet player, who said, there's an isness. There's a place at which you become part of the music. And at any time you stop to think about playing the notes, you've stopped playing music. And that moment of becoming is what I would argue is the moment of learning that we're all looking for. It's that light bulb that we're looking to see inside of our students. I don't care if you can then stop and tell me step 1 to 8, but that light bulb, when you see it, to me, that's what I'm looking for. And I want the student to be able to give themselves their own light bulb. Okay, so onward. The first big change is the idea of the book itself. If you've got to grab something and write it down and package it up and send it back and forth to things, cars do not park themselves now. Yeah, you simply steer the car such that it goes properly into the parking space. That's exactly what I'm talking about, Andrew. That's exactly it. You just do it the right way. But that's that moment of learning that's past steps and that kind of stuff. It's at a higher level somewhere. Okay, some do have a button. Okay, we've gotten caught into the metaphor there. So we're no longer confined by the packaging of a book. So it doesn't have to be steps 1 to front. We don't have to organize things, and we don't have to decide how something is done in the same way. The thing about a book and it going to publication, and one of the big changes, and I'm assuming at some point you guys have talked about open access books here. One of the beauties of an open access book is that it never becomes out of date. It never does. There isn't a point at which you have to say, well, how does the atom really look? Well, and when I was a kid, my books had the Bohr atom in it, which of course is ridiculous. But that's because at some point they had to choose what was true and then ship it out. Now, we don't have to get down to the point where we have to choose what's true. We can keep that negotiation going, right? So the book and the publishing and the printing and the sending it out impose this idea of saying, this is true, now you learn it. And I don't think we're there anymore. The other thing is the access, right? This is my daughter, by the way. You can all say she's cute. You could say she's cute. Thank you. we don't actually we don't have to actually wait for that anymore. We don't have to actually um, you know take all of the idea and the knowledge from what one person can remember in one community, what one person in front of the room can do, what one book can actually hold, right? We're not bounded in that sense anymore. The the access to content, the access to information, the direct access, more importantly, to the real experience of others. I mean, you guys have had some really good speakers in here. You're forced to listen to me babble today, but you've got, a really great access to expertise all around. You've got students coming in from San Diego. You've got master's students coming in over in next week. You've got some really great, it is very near Green Gables. You've got some really great professionals in this classroom right now. That completely changes how we have to go about doing things. No more do you have to say, here's the method for teaching blogging inside the classroom. You can engage with 50 people who are doing that and pull together your own understanding, right? You don't have to go to the How to Teach Blogging in the Classroom book. You can pull those things together from that whole group, from that whole connection, right? Or you can get it from the best memorizer. So, to bring us back to the topic of this conversation, which is the rhizome. The metaphor for how this goes through, for me, is the rhizome. How many people know what a rhizome is? How many people have a garden with something they can't kill in it? Yeah. This thing in front of you is the nastiest thing in the whole wide world, okay? This is a Japanese knotweed. Japanese knotweed. When they had to clean it out of the field, they were putting a new building in for the 2012 Olympics in London. They dug down 30 feet to try to get rid of all the rhizomes. Okay, this thing reproduces. It reproduces by flowers going around and stuff, but it also spreads. Right, there's a set of trees that replicate by rhizomes and that grow in the States. They're called, I think they're alders. Whispering. Anyway, they slip under the ground and they take off in random directions. They follow paths that they follow the easiest paths or the best path underground, and they move around, right? And you can't control them, you can't stop them. Once you get them started, once you get this thing in your backyard, you're toast. You can do whatever you want, but once you give it a chance, it takes hold and it takes off on its own. So to some degree, I'm making the give the man a fishing rod, teach him how to fish, he can fish forever kind of argument, except with a plant that won't go away. So rhizomes are aggressive, chaotic, and resilient. They're difficult to contain and they follow their own paths. That's the rhizomatic learning model in a nutshell, right? You're opening up the door to your classrooms getting chaotic, to the path that gets taken will sometimes be stronger than your ability to stop it, or sometimes stopping it actually ruins the way that a direction of class that you want it to go in. So it takes on a life of its own. There's some good things about that and some bad things about that. I won't lie to you. Just to review the rhizome metaphor. So if you look at this, right? You see this little guy right here? That guy there? That's the rhizome, right? It's the thing that spreads from plant to plant. The roots go in and the plant comes out, right? At random places. You never know when that's going to happen. And this is, oh, the fragile plants get choked. It's terrible. But hey, stop taking my metaphor too far, Lisa Lane. Now, the idea is that you need to be able to contain, you need to create an ecology, a garden around these things. I was actually ready for that, Lisa. You need to create an ecology. You need to create a garden. You need to create restrictions, broad restrictions for where you want this plant to go. You can't have a class and say, let's get together and talk. You need to have topic. You need to have some structure in place. You need to have gardeners, thank you. You need to have people in place who are going to say, yeah, we're going to let this thing go all over the place. I want you to come out. Maybe I have 25 students in a classroom and they all come out with completely different outcomes in a traditional sense of outcomes. That's okay. That's okay, as long as you've built the ecology to begin with. As long as you've... Killex won't kill it. Won't kill the Japanese knotweed. You can forget it. So if you build that structure and you say, okay, we're going to work within these guidelines. We're going to give you sort of these basic goals, and then that's going to get you to the place where inside of that structure you can do whatever you want. and you're building patterns of behavior, right? You're saying, I want you to go out and figure this out and decide this for yourself so that you can encourage that kind of sort of lifelong learning that we're all looking for. So the first part of this, and the thing that I think is maybe the most important part of this, is the idea of an open syllabus, right? You need to have you need to structure a syllabus, you need to structure a plan, you need to structure your course in such a way that there's a guide. It's still a syllabus. It's not a piece of paper that says, man, I don't know what we're going to do. It has to follow some kind of path, right? And that's about creating that ecology. But there needs to be room for the content of the course, for the curriculum of the course to actually get formed on the way. So the community of the course actually becomes the curriculum, right? The learning from each other, the connections that you make, the fact that you guys are all connecting with all these other people, those things become the curriculum of the course itself. Can rhizomes survive a transplant to significantly foreign soil and environment? The rhizomes that we're talking about here, you plant one, you take one little piece of it and you put it in one little piece of your backyard and you will curse me forever. They are so incredibly resilient. It's just amazing. You don't need much of them, you don't need much of a piece, but once they start along the patterns, things get just absolutely crazy. So that idea of the open syllabus, and I don't have these links in here and I should have, but the link in if you look at my introduction slide, that URL there, that links to the open syllabus that I designed for the last time that I taught the course. So, first slide that got mucked up. So, 50 points to the first person who tells me what this picture is. I took it today outside. Come on. 50 whole points, come on. It is a fire hydrant. How'd you know that? Bacon. Yeah, you're just smart. Perfect. Yeah, it's a fire hydrant. Look at you guys. You're all ears. Nobody else got it. Yeah, always with the chocolate. So, openness. And this is where this starts to mesh together. Openness is messy and chaotic and hard to contain, like this chat room right here, right? And there are people still who end up seeing a chat room like this and say, those people aren't paying attention. Those people aren't listening. Those people aren't staying on topic. You guys have already started 4 or 5 separate conversations that have themes to them and have structures. But that kind of open, sort of exploratory rhizoming, is one of those things that actually allows those moments of becoming to happen. So you don't know necessarily how this is going to, how you're going to end up at the place. You don't know what that plant coming up is necessarily going to be, but as long as you're inside that ecology, it's probably going to be something that's going to be useful to you. The key is that each person needs to have the freedom to take their own path so that they can get out what they need. Our hydrants aren't very literate. It's very descriptive. Look, it says open. That's what you need to do with a hydrant. Now. You guys leave the firemen alone. Now, okay, I have 19 minutes. So, another part of this, and to me, maybe the most important shift in my own thinking over the 5 years, is where the quote-unquote outcomes exist. I essentially argue that in almost any course, the real impact on your life, on your practice, particularly in this where you guys are already, I think you guys are pretty much all professionals already, is not going to be during this course. You're going to have maybe a couple of things that you're going to understand. What's more likely is 6 months from now, you're going to be sitting in an office, somebody's going to say something, you're going to go, what was that guy's name? With the thing, when he said that thing about the plant, I didn't agree with most of it, but there's that one thing. Now, that rhizome guy, exactly. So those moments are things that tend to happen at random places. They don't happen when you're sitting in front of the classroom. They don't happen when you're writing the assignment necessarily. But they happen all over these different spaces. So the rhizomatic learning model, as I see it, is one where we plan for the outcomes to happen after the course. So essentially, in one of my classes, you plan for how you're going to learn for the next 6 months. When you come out with this plan. You say, okay, I saw this and I've done this, and this realization was really important to me. I think it might be useful for this. I have no idea, but I put it together. I think about it. I reflect on how it affects my practice, and I put some kind of plan together to go out and continue. It produces a roadmap. Thank you, Mick. You're very useful. It pulls that together. It gives you a chance to say, there are these things that there are these things that I think might be important. They may lead to connections later on, but I don't necessarily know how that's going to work out yet. Okay. So, one of the other really important parts of this is what we're doing here, which are live slides. So, I'm going to ask you guys to just give me sort of like, how do you feel about sort of breaking the wall in the middle, doing all the slide stuff, going back to the chat room? Does this kind of interaction work out for you? Um, it is fun. I really like it. I enjoy it. I enjoy the sort of different perspectives that come in. And it also reflects sort of one of the core concepts of the model. And that's that I don't know a lot of things. I also don't know you guys very well. So the more that I hear back from you guys about um, how this affects your practice, how one of the things that came in one of the slides earlier, again, jogged my memory from something that somebody said earlier, is that the nomads frighten me. And that's not something that's ever going to come from me, Dave Cormier. I love the nomads. The nomads make me excited. They don't frighten me. But you know what? There's good reason to be frightened by them. And when I see that, I go, right, that's a really good thing to incorporate into this talk. And I find that in any learning environment, the people that people are haven't gone for the second glass of wine yet. I think that's a compliment. I'll take that. I'm going to decide it's a compliment. How's that? So having that chance to hear from people and to have that, because the chat room's nice, but it passes by, right? There's something much more solidified about this kind of interactive space. And it really does show, I think, one of the big differences between being in a face-to-face classroom and being here. Right now, essentially, all 51 of us can talk at the same time. We can all impact the conversation at the same time. And I think there's something really exciting about that. There are affordances, pardon the use of the expression, there are affordances that you lose moving to a web space, right? There are things that you don't get. There are things that pass away. I don't get a chance to look at all you guys and find out how many of you are just sitting back slugging wine in your offices and how many of you are actually engaged in the conversation. So you lose that, right? You lose that chance to really get the feedback. We need more participa. I wonder what that says. But this is one of those ways to get that back. And for me, and this is more about teaching online, but I happened to talk about this for like 4 hours last week, so it's on top of my head right now. And that's that anytime you move to a new learning environment or a new approach, you have to look at yourself as an educator and say, what do I do well? Not what are the models and what am I good at? Am I good at getting people energetic? Am I good at preparing? Am I a good speaker? Am I good at making people feel comfortable? And then when you move to the online space, you have to think, how can I make that work? That thing that I'm good at, how can I do that here? The thing for me, I'm an energy freak. I get into it, I'm lazy the rest of the day and all the time, but you put me in a room of people and I start flailing my arms around, hopping up and down because I love the interaction, I love the back and forth. So this is one of those solutions for me to get more chaotic energy into the discussion. I will address that. Oh, look at you. There. It's me. I'm on the video. The reason why, yeah, exactly. The reason why most people don't do the video is because it can actually impact people's ability to follow along with the discussion. But that's me anyway. Hi, guys. So I'm certainly not trying to say that there's not going to be frustration. That's my boy. You can all say that he's cute too. I have two. I have this terrible, obnoxious habit of making sure that my kid's making it to every presentation I do. There's resistance to this, right? If you walk into a classroom, and I do it, my second day of teaching the sort of rhizomatic learning model, my second day, I have a revolt every second day, because I usually teach teachers, and they clam chowder, and in a brass bowl too. They walk in and they go, "Look, tell us what we're supposed to do." And I say, "How am I supposed to know what you need to do? I don't know any of you yet. We need to get to know each other before I can be of any help to you at all, right? How am I supposed to know where you are? There's no set path for any of this stuff. I don't need to tell you that you need to do this, you need to do that. If I'm teaching a marketing class, I don't know where you guys are coming from and what you're interested in and what you know already. So if we work together to build out our own curriculum, a couple of things are going to happen, right? You're going to, I will wait on that. You're going to get into the habit of learning in a way that I think is the right way, which is, sorry, I shouldn't say that, but I do think it's the right way, which is asking the person next to you and reading the book and checking for the thing and trying to figure out what you need and trying to figure out how to get there. That's what's going to help you. The reason why we're doing it in a classroom with somebody else is that I'm going to be able to go, "Oh, I hear what you guys are saying over there, but I've done this before, and I can tell you that that's going to suck. Like, that's not going to be any good for you at all." So I get to use some of my own sort of experience and sort of skill set to maybe help things along, but really, and guide maybe some of the curriculum as it goes based on my experience, but it still lets people to pull their own things out and to create the right kind of habits, right, for their teaching. So I'm going to read this again. Sorry, the rhizome is a metaphor for, like, the nomad is a metaphor. The nomad learns rhizomatically. That's what I'm saying. In directions unforeseen and maybe to new creative spaces. It's a process of becoming, of coming to understand. We're all different, and our new knowledge must become part of us. And if we look at it that way and we say that, don't talk to me about learning styles. I'm really glad that I haven't seen it yet. And if anybody has said it, please erase it, because it makes me, we'll lose the next 10 minutes with me shouting. It's not a question of learning style. It's that we all come in with different contexts and different needs. Some of us have had breakfast, and some of us, were brought up with books, and some of us, we all come in with different baggage and different feelings about stuff. Some of us have parents who watch everything we do, and some of us have parents who watch none. All of those things matter in terms of how we come to know. And every time we have those moments of knowing, we change as a person. And I think that we need to try to structure a model of learning that allows that to happen. You're going to lose the direct assessment. You're going to lose a lot of those things that people rely on, and you lose a lot of power. There's a lot of power that goes out the door inside of these things, right? So all of a sudden, those classrooms can be really hard sometimes, where people are looking, they're like, "What are we supposed to do now?" And I go, "Whew, I guess that all fell apart on us, didn't it? How are we going to pull this back together?" But again, almost every one of those students has come back to me at one time and gone, "You know what? It happened. Like 6 months later, I was like, oh no, I didn't know how to do this. And I had that thing with the thing." Okay. So, to wrap around, rhizomatic learning, it's about knowledge negotiation. It's about coming together and knowing between people and talking your way through it. It's not about having an accepted piece of knowledge and handing it off to something. It's open-ended in the sense that I don't want you to hit all your outcomes by the time you reach the end of my class. I want you to get the pieces that you need, the habits that you need, and then take that out with you, right? So the rhizomes head off in directions. You pull the box off around the planter, and then it takes off, right? It's student-driven almost entirely, right? It's student-driven from a point of them knowing what they need, of them being able to pull those habits together, all that stuff. It's chaotic. It's difficult to assess. It's difficult to script. It's terrible on a day when you're not on. I highly advise not doing this hungover. There are, you've got to be there. You really do have to be on top of it. And that idea of, yeah, exactly. That idea of encouraging nomads and trying, it's hugely difficult to assess and script. And again, you can see my assessment model that I set up for the course that I taught last summer. Becoming over memory, it's not a question of being able to recall and repeat. And I know these things are talked about in a lot of different ways, but I'm just trying to pull my own sort of thinking back together. And more importantly, the most important part of this is that it's about learning for your whole life. Not learning when you're in a classroom, not learning how to roast coffee, which I'm obsessive about, any differently then you learn how to do math, then you learn how to do anything else, right? You approach it with the same desire for creativity, for understanding, so that you can live longer than, you can take it further than that. There it is.